I'm joined here with Josh and Kalie. And I'm really curious because obviously you guys have been, how long have you been traveling now or moving and living in different places? It's a long time, right?
Coming up on 14 years. We've been doing it 13 years. 14 years should happen at some point.
Maybe in the spring, I guess. Yeah.
That's pretty intense. And out of that, how many continents or countries have you actually lived in for a significant amount of time?
Okay, so well, just quickly, we started off in Spain. So we went from Spain to South Korea, then South Korea to Saudi Arabia to Singapore, which is really funny. We just happened to find ourselves in all of these countries that started with the letter S.
Yeah, I just thought that.
Yeah. And then from Singapore, we broke things, and now we're in Portugal. Although we did look into Slovenia.
Well, yeah, I was going to say it was about to be another S, and then we realized that the visa was going to be a bit difficult and something that we didn't want to do, which we can get more into that later if you want to talk about it. But yeah,
great. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. At least 5 countries you've been living in, and that's across a massive spread of places. What was it that motivated you guys to go off in the first place and leave the US? And how did you come to make that decision together?
Yeah, I have a different response than Kalie's. I mean, we kind of had different journeys before we got together. But for me, there were kind of 2 really important things. One was my grandmother. Whenever she was able to travel, now she's a bit older, she's 95, I think. Mm-hmm. She traveled a lot, and I would receive these really wild, whimsical, interesting gifts from her travels. And then she would have stories to tell me. And as a kid, that made a massive impression on me. So then fast forward to my university years, and I was going to a university that had a pretty high population percentage of foreign students. And I played collegiate soccer, and a lot of my teammates were from different places around the world. And that got me really curious about their language and their culture, and just wanting to travel and see where they came from, because they were cool people. And I thought, if they're cool people, then cool people are from where they're from. So that was me.
And then for me, my family traveled a lot when I was younger. And I think a lot of it was due to my dad's job, and my parents like to travel. So they would leave us for weeks at a time with a grandparent or even a babysitter that stayed at our house, and they'd be gone for a few weeks and they would travel. So I always thought that was interesting. And then we traveled a lot nationally and internationally growing up. So it was kind of no surprise that when I got a little older, I would want to continue on this and possibly live somewhere else out of the US.
Wow. So you got together and started to hatch this emigration plan in the US, or did you meet on travels, or how did that occur?
Yeah, well, we met actually when we were both in university, and technically I had already finished, but Kalie was still going to university, and both of us were collegiate soccer players, and that was kind of how we knew each other. But then I really started to dig deeper into this whole living abroad thing. And I realized that the path of least resistance for me, at least at the time, was to be an ESL teacher. And I had looked into that. I kind of shared my ideas with Kalie. We were just dating at the time.
It was my senior year. Yeah. We just started talking, really. And you were planning on leaving in January of my senior year.
Yeah. And we started talking in September, October, started officially dating in November. And I tried to dump her by December so I could leave.
Actually true. He did try to dump me, and I said no. I said, you will not. We have a good thing going on here. I want to move as well. Just let me graduate, and then I'll go with you.
So we had to wait I had to wait. You didn't have to wait. I had to wait until May. I think May was when we left, and we did the dumb American thing where you decide to backpack Europe for forever. It's 45 days.
Yeah, with bags for moving was the problem. So we had a hiking backpack and a rolly suitcase, and it was a disaster.
Every 2 days in a different city, trying to find your way around, lost, no smartphones back then.
Oh gosh, directions were awful. And the thing is that'll really make or break a relationship. We tell people either you're gonna end up hating the person and you break up or whatever, or you find, all right, I can deal with this person. So it worked for us.
We're still here.
Oh my goodness. I didn't realize that was going to such an engaging story. That's amazing. I love that. so like fresh out of uni, then you went off. So you went backpacking, and then what happened next? Did you like return to the US and think, I enjoyed that, I want to do more? Like, what was the sequence of events?
Well, the backpacking was brought on because both of us had landed jobs that we needed to be in Spain for. So initially I was planning on moving to Greece with a friend, and then Kalie enters the picture, and then this person doesn't want to move, gets cold feet, and then Kalie gets a job as an au pair, so as an English teacher, but as an au pair or a live-in nanny with a family that's in Madrid or just outside of Madrid. So I start shifting my focus to, well, let me go to Barcelona because there's a big TEFL school there, and I can do my TEFL and then get placed, somewhere in the country. Well, the family that she was going to work for found an amazing program that was in its second year in Madrid. In Madrid. And so I applied for that. I got accepted. So I went and I did this university program to get a master's, and a part of the master's is an internship that was paid. So I would have some living money, and that was what sparked it. We decided, okay, we need to leave on this date in May. So we have 45 days to travel, and then we'll arrive in Madrid to start work.
Wow.
In your program. I had to start work before. But I would say this too, when we started dating, we went to different universities. We were just in the same conference at the time. So that's kind of how we knew each other, through soccer. So we started off our relationship doing the long distance thing. So when we first thought, well, I can be in Madrid, you can be in Barcelona, that's closer than actually how we live now. So we thought it would work. But then the family that I was working for was like, oh, that's so far, you can't do that. And so she found the program, and it worked out really well.
And I completely agree with them. It was really dumb and naive of us to think that we could have made it work logistically going from Madrid to Barcelona. Yeah. Yes, there is a high connection train, like a high speed train that connects the two cities. Absolutely. That costs a fortune when you're a university student. Like, it is way unaffordable.
Yeah, we were making peanuts, living a great life. I mean, in Madrid, you could live a great life, especially back then. But we weren't making much, so that would not have worked because, in the States, we had our cars, so we could just drive. That wasn't going to be an option. So it worked out, though. We ended up in Madrid together, living in the same city for once.
Yep.
Wow, that's amazing. So how long were you in Spain for? And when did you start to get the sort of feeling that it was time to move on to another country?
We arrived in 2009, and we spent 2 years there. So we were there kind of during the whole crisis that hit both Spain, Portugal. They were already the nicknames of pigs. I don't know if you remember that, but it was Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, and Spain that were the pigs of Europe. Kind of a derogatory name for kind of how bad the economies were. So 18 months in, we had gotten to the point where we were starting to consider either signing another contract, staying on, or leaving and going somewhere else. And we just kind of felt like there were some social, cultural things that we just didn't fit in Spain, and we wanted to leave and try something new. And that was when we decided, let's try something completely new and let's go to Asia.
Yeah, because neither of us had ever been to Asia. And in the meantime, in the 2 years, we were dating when we first got there. After a year, we got engaged. And then after our second year in Madrid, we went back to the States, we got married, and then we went to Korea together, married.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, I'm getting the full romance history. It's gorgeous. So you went to South Korea. Actually, before we moved to South Korea, you were saying you realized you didn't quite fit, or Spain wasn't a fit for you. So how important is it for you to feel like there is a fit? And what factor is it that maybe was the thing that broke the camel's back there? Because for a lot of people, when they're deciding to emigrate, one of the things that I've noticed is they just think that they're going to have a much better life somewhere else. And of course, I think if you don't work out what's really going on in the background, you often take it with you. So I'm just wondering about this suitability. What was it you thought was making Spain maybe not the place for you?
Yeah, I don't think that you ever know that a place is going to feel like home until you really spend time there, right? I think you can go on holiday and feel like, yeah, I'd like to live here, which we do that. We always travel to a place and we ask ourselves, could we live here or not? But then, that also begs the question, like, how long can you live there? Because kind of, we don't consider ourselves nomadic, but we do like to move around and consider ourselves expats in the sense that we don't move to a place with the intention of being there the rest of our lives. It's not a long-term move, but a short or medium-term move. So for us in Spain, it was kind of like the social norms that really stuck out to us. We were tired of being like shoulder barged walking down the streets, whereas in North American culture, you move out of the way of someone coming, so that both people can pass. Like you're on a sidewalk where there's enough room for two people, yet two people are walking your direction. One person should tuck in. But in Madrid, they'll, like, kids, young people, I shouldn't say kids, young people, old people, it doesn't matter, will walk 2-3 abreast and smash into you.
Don't care that you're
but nothing is said. It's not rude to them. I actually had a conversation with some of my students about this, and they did not realize it was rude. And I said, look, if you travel to, let's say, the US, Canada, or the UK, and you do that, you better say sorry. But it's probably better to just tuck in and avoid the contact, because you will absolutely be at least spoken to for doing that, if not get into an altercation, depending if you do it with the wrong person.
Yeah, I found for me that it turned me into a person I didn't want to be, because I would get so frustrated all the time, just walking on the sidewalk, and then I would feel like I need to barge into people. And so although for them culturally it was not a big deal, for me it was changing me in a way that I just didn't feel comfortable. I didn't like that I was kind of becoming a bit angrier as a person. So culturally, that is where it got a little difficult for me.
And I would say the second thing would be the slowness of things. Like, things are quite bureaucratic there, and yes, they are in Portugal too, but we're now ready for that. Like, Spain prepared us for Portugal in that way. We just weren't ready for how slow and inefficient things were, so we got frustrated with that. But again, it was our first country abroad, seeing kind of the way things are different from our home country to our host country. So we had to experience that, I think, to kind of appreciate what we have now.
And I would say this isn't as much of an issue in Spain and Madrid as it is, now than it was before. But the language was really hard, actually. A lot of people did not speak English. They were really behind in that. And that's fine. We were learning Spanish, but they were not very kind with, obviously, we are not native Spanish speakers. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't slow down their speech. Mm-hmm. It was just very hard in Madrid to understand them. So not only did we have people who, like, it's like, all right, I can't understand this. And you learn very quickly how to say, can you please say that slower, in Spanish? And then they repeat it. And it's like, that wasn't slower, so you'd have this language thing that was really hard. And the lack of English was also difficult because they had issues with that because of their dictatorship and everything and how they did things. So they were pretty behind when it came to English. But which again is fine. We were learning Spanish, but it was a very difficult city to learn Spanish in. So that also, it kind of makes it uncomfortable. It doesn't, you feel like you stick out a little bit. You are a foreigner. It's not home because you might always have something where, you can't communicate. And I think that's where Madrid, it kind of wore on you a little bit. Mm-hmm. It's different now that we've since been back and there's a lot more English, so it's a lot more comfortable. They're seeing a lot more tourism and seeing the value of knowing English because of it being like the world language right now. So it's different now, but back then it was pretty hard.
Spain's still behind. Like, statistically, analytically, they're still behind when it comes to English fluency.
Well, it sounds like a slightly hostile experience, and it's really interesting, Kalie, that you were saying you felt like you were changing a little bit in a way that you didn't like. I do think, when you go to a different place, you almost do assume a new identity. You've got different culture, food, different clothes, different temperatures, everything about you changes. Yes, your friends, definitely. So what was South Korea like then, by comparison?
Oh, man.
So obviously we really stuck out there.
South Korea was South Korea was absolutely like being dropped on the other side of the world, with everything being so foreign and different to us. So to give context, we were in the second largest city, which is Busan. So Busan, South Korea, it's like 5 million people, at least at the time it was 5 million people in the metropolitan area. So no small city by any stretch of the means. I think Seoul is like double, maybe triple that size in the metro area, but Busan, large, right? And we get dropped off to our apartment because our work had supplied us with an apartment to live in. It was a part of the contract. And in that particular neighborhood, there was zero English, and we didn't know any Korean yet. So it was like all we were seeing were Korean characters everywhere. It was a huge catalyst for us to, or at least for me, to want to start reading Korean fast, which fortunately the Korean language is among the easiest languages in the world to learn how to read.
Really?
You don't always know what you're reading. Yeah.
The characters.
The actual, like the alphabet is super easy to learn how to read. It took me about 45 minutes on a bus to learn.
Wow.
Which is also how I made one of our first Korean friends, and how we got our dog.
Who's sitting in my lap right now.
Yes. But it was so strange because we're dropped off in this place with different smells and signs and sounds and everything.
Yeah, I mean, it was still felt like a big city because of their high rises and everything. So it's like big, but you still have this really small feel with the way that certain things are done. Like one of the hardest, I think, to initially figure out, and thankfully our schools were very helpful with this, like in showing you or teaching you, you could just go and ask, like, I don't know how to do this. They are very big on recycling. So your trash bags, you have to pay for certain trash bags because they want you to recycle. So the bags that you use for trash have to be specific, and those are you have to pay. But then you go down to the recycling and you have to, there's like not a guard, but practically it's like a self-imposed guard of like one of the older guys who's like, he's retired, he's got nothing to do. So he like polices the recycling.
It's like a complex guard. So imagine someone who operates the gate or whatever, if it does have a gate, but they walk the grounds a couple times a day and they just make sure things are.
But sometimes I don't even think they're paid by the complex. They're just there because they want to make sure it's done right. I don't know. But anyway, so, it's like you're trying to figure out how to do all the recycling and you have to pay for these bags. So you're in the grocery store, like, I need trash bags. Like, where are these? You have different sizes. And so it's just kind of some of those things were like so different. But thankfully we did have, our Korean colleagues were quite helpful with explaining things. I would say one of my favorite things about Korea, we were working at a school at that point. At that point, I stopped doing the au pair nanny thing because we found that it was going to be easier to be teaching. So we were working at different schools. And when you go to school there, you take your shoes off at the front and they've got cubbies and you wear slippers all day. Everyone wears slippers around school. It's amazing. So you can just wear, if you want, you can wear like heels or something nice. But you don't have to wear them all day. It's just like to get there. And it's so nice. So you wear slippers all day at school.
And I personally hated that.
I thought it was amazing.
I would hate that too. I would absolutely hate that. I think slippers are awful. Oh.
Uncomfortable.
I'm almost phobic about slippers. Oh, they freak me out. So South Korea, not a place to go if you don't like slippers.
Now you know.
yeah, I do. And how did you get to feel at home? Like, what tips have you got about feeling at home quickly in a new place? Because obviously that is a very sort of foreign experience, isn't it?
Yeah, I think something that we weren't really able to do while in Spain because of our living situation. Kalie was living with her host family. I was living with other roommates. We didn't really have our own space. We had our room as our own space. But once we had the apartment that we lived in, we started to bring pictures and things from the US out. And even like just printing out stuff that was familiar to us and putting it on the wall. I think it helped out a ton.
We're just buying our own things too. Like we bought our own comforter and pillows and all that stuff that was kind of provided for us.
Yep. Instead of having like the cheap IKEA version of something that, And
then we got a dog too.
Well, I was also going to say friends. I think that in certainly in Korea, it was the first place that we really got a good group of friends that more or less like matched what our goals and objectives were, at least at the time. And that helped. And they were American too. Our friends in Spain were awesome, but we hardly had an American friend there. So there was this like, I don't know, there was this weird tension, not a negative tension, but this weird tension that we always had, even with the other English speaking friends we had, because we're foreigners to each other very much culturally. So we're exploring things culturally, and that can be exhausting, like always having to like think about cultural cues and mind your manners and that type of thing. Whereas with Americans, it just is so native to us to like do things in a similar way and not offend the other, right? That makes sense.
This is why when people move, they tend to find people from their own country, you know, and why you have places like Little China, Little Italy,
Chinatown,
little sorry,
Little India.
This is exactly why you have
Italy.
places like Chinatown, Little India, Little Italy. Yeah, I mean, you have those because you find a commonality, and it's not just language. I mean, language definitely helps. So when you find people who speak your language, but when you find people who are actually from your country, like Josh said, it takes the exhausting thought process out of things, and you can just relax a bit more. So that helps. But we also, I mean,
you've got a point of reference, haven't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. But in Korea, we also were able to meet a really good mix of people. We had Korean friends, a very good South African friend that we still keep in touch with, some of the Americans from there, some of the Brits. And what's really fun is, you know, now that we're in Portugal, some of those friends that we met in Korea, British friends, are back in the UK. And, you know, we just saw one. We visited with him, and it had been like
two. We visited one that was in Ireland, so we got to go visit him, and then another one came here to Porto to visit us.
And it had been like 8 years since we had seen these friends.
It was like no time went by. Like,
yeah.
Oh.
So I think that
picked right up.
I think that's something that is too, when you're an expat, when you move around like that, you kind of understand how it works, and you understand it, not so transient, but like people come and go. Yeah. But you have the same mentality and mindset. So when you do get together, it's quite easy just to pick back up like nothing has changed, because you think the same way.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people who move for the first time, they're maybe not really prepared for that. You know, if the sort of transiency of the friends that you might make, because you might make friends for a year or two and then think, you're in it for life, and then all of a sudden they're off to their next destination. Yeah, that can be a bit of a bitter pill, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
we have commentary on that when we get to Singapore.
Oh yeah.
Really? Okay. So South Korea sounds like a really amazing experience, and I'm guessing at some point you decided it was time to move. What was your motivation to move on to, I believe, Saudi Arabia?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if we should talk about the leaving Korea or the going to Saudi, but I mean, I guess for it to make sense, we'll talk a little bit about both. So Korea was an amazing experience. I don't think it would be a place that we would ever go back to as like to live.
Mm-hmm. And we miss the food a lot, though.
Miss the food tremendously. The diversity of food there is a bit problematic, but fortunately the food in general is so good there that as long as you branch out of like what you know, then you'll discover that there's a lot more to Korean food than just the dishes that make it outside of Korea.
Yeah.
So for us, I think, again, there were some cultural things that started to wear on us. We were always going to be foreigners there, and we stood out always, like always. So that was frustrating. You're always going to be a foreigner in Korea, being a Westerner or a non-Asian. Now, it does have its benefits. If we want to talk about that, it does have its benefits being a non-Asian there. But in general, it just started to wear on us. And we thought, you know, there's some other places in the world, especially the Middle East, that we have some preconceived notions about, we have some ideas about that we think are incorrect. And especially me, I really wanted to push myself and understand, are those unfounded? I'm pretty sure they are. I'm tired of Western media telling me how to feel about the Middle East. Really tired of it, especially at that time. That was what, 2004,
14.
Yeah,
13,
2013, 14. So there was a lot of like Islamophobia that was being talked about, and just other things. And I felt internally uncomfortable by thoughts and stuff. So I really wanted to go experience it for myself. Now, in saying that, Kalie told me that she was open to the Middle East, but anywhere but Saudi Arabia. I said, cool.
Famous last words.
I will oblige you, and I will look for work elsewhere. And we did. We found jobs that were in the UAE.
Mm-hmm.
Long story short, with that, they just the jobs were not going to be good.
It was a new school, lots of kinks to work
really
out.
Disorganized, and we just decided to turn down the offer. And an offer in Saudi Arabia presented itself, and we both looked at each other and we were like, well, we don't have anything else, coming up, so let's go.
Yep. And so we went.
So what was that like then? I mean, I want to touch on, like, how do you work it out when one of you wants to do something and the other doesn't? Because that definitely comes up between couples, married couples, and friends as well. But what was it like going into Saudi with the sort of preconceptions that you had? What were you fearing might happen, Kalie, in going there? And what was the reality of it?
Well, obviously you hear about how women are treated. So just not sure like what that was going to be like. I mean, we knew that we, in getting information from the school, you had to be covered, but like, so the abaya and covering your hair, but you obviously don't have that when you're on the plane going there. So I'm like, what do I wear? So I just wore like a long sleeve black shirt and a long skirt, like a black skirt. And they were like, oh, that's fine. But I was like very nervous about it, but it ended up being fine. It wasn't a big deal. So you have this idea of like, I don't know how I'm going to be treated, but the people there are very nice. I mean, they do things differently, obviously, differently than what we know. And when you go into it thinking like, I'm not going to go in and change this culture because I think it should be like this. Let me just go in and be respectful of this culture, even if there are things that I disagree with. But I'll be respectful while I'm here, and I'll learn while I'm here, and see, if anything comes out of it. So I think you have to go in with an open mind. And we always tell people like, Saudi Arabia is not the first place that someone goes as an expat. You generally go somewhere else first, and then you eventually make your way there for a variety of reasons. But when I went there, I just was like, well, we'll see. Like maybe I won't go anywhere without Josh. We were living on a compound and everything, so it wasn't too bad. But you go there and it's different. And it's doable. And I didn't find it very uncomfortable. You do, cover up to kind of fit in as well so you don't stick out. But it was fine. I didn't feel unsafe or uncomfortable at any point.
And we were not in Riyadh either. We were actually in the most conservative province in the country.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
So, yeah.
But overall, people were nice. It was just a very different experience. And it's very different now than when we were there because they've opened up a lot more. Now they have an actual tourist visa. Before, you couldn't get in unless you were Muslim and going on your Mecca, or you had an actual work permit.
Not on your Mecca.
Going on your Hajj to Mecca, sorry. And now they have a tourist visa. Now women can drive. They don't separate restaurants. Before, when we went, there was a family side and a single male side. So it was just very different then compared to now. So we're actually quite open to going back and seeing how it's changed.
I'd like to go back. Yeah, I'd like to go back. I actually really enjoyed the Middle East. We got to travel a lot of it. There were only a few countries that we didn't go to.
It's positioned in a perfect place in the world to get to places.
Everywhere.
Yeah, it's so central. So it's very easy to travel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that sounds amazing. And how soon after Saudi did you go to Singapore?
Very quickly. So we did go to Saudi Arabia with the objective to, have our prejudices tested. And then also we had a financial objective to meet. And those two things were met pretty quickly. Yeah. I mean, like within the first 6 months of being there, we met those. And around that time, we had traveled to Malaysia, Singapore, and Indonesia. And we didn't get to visit those places when we were living in South Korea, mainly because we weren't making a lot of money in South Korea, and flights and stuff can be quite expensive.
And it's far.
Super easy to get to Japan from South Korea. Pretty easy and inexpensive to get to China from South Korea. Taiwan as well. Yeah. But elsewhere, it can be a little spendy. especially when you're making like $2,000 a month. So when we were in Saudi, we could afford nice holidays and such, and we found great flights because there's a lot of great flights out of the Middle East in general. So we traveled through Malaysia, Singapore, and Indonesia, and by the time we hit Singapore, we were just blown away at the profile of the country, and we thought, this is the next place we want to live.
And how long were you in Singapore?
4 years.
Yeah, 4 years.
Yeah.
So that's your longest stay yet, right?
Yeah, 4 years is our longest stay, and we could have stayed longer. We had an amazing experience there, and we left a lot of amazing friends, and both local and foreign friends there. Some of them have since moved, but fantastic experience. Work was kind of the reason we wanted to leave.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a few trips to Singapore. I lived in Bali, Indonesia for a while, and I had to fly backwards and forwards to get my visas redone. Yeah, and Singapore was just a great place to go to. I loved it. I did notice. I mean, it seems so clean and so well organized. And I was really quite shocked, going from Indonesia to then Singapore and then back again. The difference is really immense. What was it like living in such an organized society? Because my feeling is that at Singapore, it's very tightly managed. Is that correct, or?
I think yes and no, and it's not for everyone because of that. We actually had friends who preferred Indonesia and Malaysia, right around it, because they felt that they liked a little bit more of the grittiness.
Yeah,
you don't get that in Singapore.
No, you don't.
You definitely don't get that in the main areas. If you move a little further on the outskirts of the island, it's a little more like that, but not anywhere near Malaysia and Indonesia, that status. So it's really not for everyone. And we have friends who said that. I don't think, I'm a very organized person, so I kind of like the clean, the tidiness. So it didn't bother me. I thought it was fine. And honestly, I think, if you're not doing anything wrong, then it's a great place to live because it's extremely safe and you can feel comfortable and safe there. So we weren't doing anything wrong. So it just cultivates this type of culture that's very comfortable to live in. And it felt like home. That was the thing that I think, Josh was going to touch on earlier when, some of these places that we moved from, they didn't really feel like home. The newness wore off and then it wasn't comfortable, didn't feel like home. Singapore does. And that's why you have people who are there for 10, 12, 15 years, then they forget what it's like to be a new expat coming in. And there are people who are still only going to be there for a couple of years, and it can be a bit more transient. So you can talk a little bit about that, because I think you were going to say that. But it's why people stay a long time, because it feels like home.
Yeah, we did work with a few people that Singapore was their first country that they had lived outside of. So they had grown up in the US or Canada. They moved to Singapore. They had been in Singapore for 5, some even 10 years. And especially in working in international schools, it's a revolving door. So with that, you have families that are going to be there or colleagues that are going to be there, 1 or 2 years, and then some that are going to be there 3 or 4 years, and some that are going to be like 5+. And these people started to grow very cold to people that were only 1 year in, or like brand new or 1 year in, because they thought, well, I don't want to develop a relationship with you because you're just going to leave me in a year, or you're going to leave me in 6 months, which is a terrible way to go about it. Because the reality is that because of the life that we live, because you're choosing to live internationally, there is a high risk that someone is going to enter your life and be amazing, but then also leave.
Yeah.
And you have to take that risk if you want to get the most out of your relationships with people, because it turns some of the people that we knew into like really, really bad people to be around, like really negative people to be around, even though that wasn't their real true personality. They just became like that because they were so closed and guarded to having meaningful relationships. And it was a disservice to everybody, because these people that are there for 5 and 10 years, they have a lot of wisdom that they can share and that you can glean off of. But if they're not going to open up to you and you're just going to have superficial relationships, it doesn't benefit anybody.
Yeah, and it's not a great first impression too, especially for those people who it might be their first time going to Singapore or leaving their home country. And so here they are new, never done this before, and you've got someone who's like, oh, you must like it, you've been here 5 years, but then it's like, I can't even have a relationship with you. It's very confusing.
Like, talk to me when you're in year 3.
Yeah, like how ridiculous is that? We had people say that. It's ridiculous. But I think the thing that, like,
go on.
people the thing that they lose when they do that is someone might come into your life and only be there for 6 months or a year, and we don't know where they're going to go. Maybe they're going to go back to their home country, but maybe they're going to go somewhere else. So you know what? Next time I have vacation, I'm going to that place to see you. Yes. And I'm experiencing a new city. I mean, it's so cool. Like, even, after stuff opened up with COVID a little bit, we went to Germany, and my closest friend, who's still in Singapore, met us there. And we hadn't been able to see each other for years. She hadn't met our daughter because, people weren't traveling. But it's like, you know what? Let's find a place that we can both get to easily. And over Christmas break, we met up. And it was like, it's like nothing has ever changed, And again, it goes back to that mentality of like, this is the kind of lifestyle you live. And you have this bond that it's hard to explain to people who don't do this, who don't live abroad.
Mm.
Yeah. Do you know what, when you were talking about that and how people are very guarded about making friendships and stuff, I always think like when you're away, or even actually when you're in your own country, I just think we are ambassadors for our own country, aren't we? Wherever we are in the world. And it's terrible that there are people going around like giving your own nationality a bad name. I think we're ambassadors of Earth. We should all be kind of there to help each other. I love the cut of your jib. I love the way you are. It sounds like you've really made the most of all these places that you've gone to, and been very respectful with them as well. I want to change the tempo a little bit. I know there's obviously one other country that you've come to, which is Portugal. I'm sure we can talk about that another time. But what I'd really like to know is, what can you share with me right now and anyone that watches or listens in? What can you share about the stresses of being away long term and how you've overcome them? I think a lot of people don't imagine the kinds of stresses that they might be under. And I'm wondering if you could share maybe some of yours or the ones that you've observed in the people that you've met.
Yeah, I think this is quite a loaded question, to be honest.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I think that
I'm
glad it's not a lightning round. Yeah. I think the first and probably most important thing that is going to resonate with everybody is relationships. Yeah. So whether that's with friends or family, that kind of disconnecting from the everyday face-to-face contact that you have with friends and family is extremely hard.
Mm-hmm. And I think, unfortunately, sometimes friends and family make it more stressful for you and make you feel a little guilty about it as well, which can be hard.
Mm. So I think it was probably not until our 10th year of living abroad where Kalie and her mom did not cry when saying bye to each other, like at the airport or whatever.
I think she cried last time she visited Portugal, but that was more because of our daughter.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So, I think you have to be really mindful of the relationships that you have, and be very intentional when you get to your new country about maintaining those relationships that are important to you. Fortunately, these days, it's much easier. Like having things like Zoom, Skype, FaceTime to be able to at least like see facial expressions and match tone of voice with the facial expression is better than just simply a phone call in terms of closing the distance. But you have to be intentional, setting up like a regular call with family and friends that are important to you. My dad and I had to do this because we would go stretches of like 2, 3, 4 months when we were living in Spain without talking. And it started to feel kind of uncomfortable in our relationship, and we didn't really talk about it. But then finally when we did, it's like, look, we've got to start doing a weekly call. Like on this day at this time, let's call each other.
Yeah. Because I think a common excuse or reason is, well, I don't know what time it is there. Or I don't know what you're doing because there's a time zone thing, and there's, so you got to just, set something so that they know, so, family or friends back home know. And if you have something that's a bit more set, then it's like they never have to question that. But again, it is a lot easier, like you were saying. And I think, unfortunately, you find friends will drop off because it's hard when you maybe have a childhood friend and you've always been in the same city, but then when you're not there, people together, it's hard, right? So sometimes friends drop off, but you do find out the ones who put the effort in, and those relationships grow even though you're apart, but you have to talk a lot more, right? So you find out like true friends and family members who are willing to put in that effort. But sometimes it gets a bit rocky, you know, and sometimes it's better to have something a little more routine and regimented to make sure you keep that going.
Wow. Well, I've really enjoyed this time with you both today. Really, truly. It's been great. I'd love to talk more another time if you're open to it, but I just want to thank you so very much. It feels like I'm in the same room with you. We must meet up.
Yes, definitely.
Need to meet up again. We'll take a look at the calendar and see when we can get to San Joaquin de Porto. Is that where you guys are now?
Well, I think we might have a CEF appointment coming up in Porto soon, so we may well.
Let us know.
We may just drop in. Now, this wouldn't really be complete without asking Josh and Kalie about their latest things. And they've just launched a new channel, an additional channel called Expats Everywhere Explorers. Here they are now telling us a little bit about their new project.
So we're using the same branding. It's called Expats Everywhere Explorers. So our main channel is Expats Everywhere, but this one is Expats Everywhere Explorers because we were noticing that it was hard to get traction on videos that were not about Portugal. So many people were going to our main channel for Portugal content, but we really love to explore the world, and we like to explore it through research and talking to people that are living in different places around the world, doing interviews about a wide variety of places. So we thought, what better place to house all that content but a new channel?
Yep. So we want to just share with everyone, because like some people will move to Portugal, but it's not necessarily their forever home, or they get to Portugal and they realize I can travel to different places. So we will vlog on this new channel. We'll do interviews like Josh said. So it's kind of just sharing the rest of the world through other expats' eyes, through our eyes, whether that's for moving somewhere else or just traveling and visiting somewhere else.
Excellent. Well, I've already subscribed, and I'm sure you'll get loads and loads of subscribers. I think it's a great idea, and I wish you all the best with it. So there you have it. That's my chat with Josh and Kalie. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Now let's turn the tables onto you. Now, obviously, something drew you to this particular recording today. And I'm guessing, you either just gone through the migration process or are preparing and deciding, you're on your migration journey at some level. If you'd like to feel supported in making your move or even adapting, having already moved here, in terms of understanding the changes that you're going through, learning how to build some emotional resources, then just book a session. Both Carl and I are here for you. We've gone through the process ourselves. I've lived in 3 different countries, and this is my longest one. I've been here 5 years. We've got time for you. We can give you a bit of hand holding, but really what I find most people need is just to be really heard, where they get their chance to share their story in a really authentic way about all that's going on for them. So if we can help in that way at all, just get in touch, and you can reach us at www.theportugalclub.com. That's where you'll find details about the memberships or coaching sessions that you might want to consider. Or if you want to support us in doing the daily show, go to www.goodmorningportugal.com. Thank you so much for connecting with us once again today. Hope to connect again real soon in the next moving story and episodes about the secrets of migration. If you have found this useful, then please do just check out the Secrets of Migration playlist below. There's so much information that's going on there. Anyway, lots and lots of love to you from all of us, all the Munsons in Portugal. Mwah.